his way back, but this one will be recorded, so we can send it out to you. We've got several others recorded. We did not record yesterday's, but if you are interested in the slide deck, we'd be happy to share that with you. I'm excited to bring back Poppe today for our session. Let me make sure I get the new name right here. Communicating your concept and nailing the pitch. So I know a lot of you are really close to submission on your challenges. I saw one come in earlier today. I'm trying to see if I see anyone from that team. Maybe Emily, I can't remember if, I know there was an Emily on that team, but I didn't look at the last name. But anyway, Poppe's going to lend some of her time today to give us tips on that process. And Poppe, let me know if you need us to give you control of the screen, or, but if you want to take it from there.
Okay, I think I have the availability. I do have the ability. Yeah, and I know that initially the the previous title was getting the right design, but after talking to Mark and Brian, this made more sense to where you are in the process. If you want more feedback on that, on how to prototype or test or ask good questions, or do any kind of evaluative design refinement, you can reach out to me. As always, my Calendly link is available. So I wanted to put that out there, but I think this will help you understand a little bit more like what is involved in a good pitch. So, because that's where you're at. I always like to have two pitches in one way. So you have your detailed document that you send out that meets all the requirements, but there's also the like TLDR version. Okay, so too long didn't read version, which is, that's really where you're kind of where you're selling it. And so that's what I'm talking about here, is like, how do you craft a good story, a good slide deck that's going to communicate your concepts, because you're doing the work. Like, we know that the work is done. We're assuming that it is in many ways. And now you have to take all of that, get out of the weeds, zoom out, and tell a story about how all of it fits together and accomplishes what you set out to do. So, and I've done this for, I'll show you some examples as well. So I actually lost power today while I was crafting my slides. So these aren't as snazzy as I probably would have made it. Like you're like, oh, they look snazzy, and I'll show you how, again, to get it to look snazzy. But okay. So the first thing to consider when you're crafting a pitch deck, a slide deck, something that's communicating your concepts, this is another design project. So it's not just enough to put it in a Word document with the outline. You really need to tell this story, and the considerations, again, like with any human-centered design project or thing that involves humans, which is most of the things we do, is you want to consider your audience, and so who they are, what's important about them, why do they care, what do they care about, and what are their perceptions of you going to be like? Where are they coming from when they're reading or listening to you talk about whatever it is you're talking about? So that's the first thing to consider, is who is my audience. The second is what are our goals? What's the purpose of this presentation at all? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? If it's you want your audience to pick your solution to move forward with and get funding, like a pitch deck, then that should be the purpose. Like, so it's a sales process. You have to really get that hook in there to show that you understand the purpose of the presentation as well. Like, we're all here for the same thing. And then again, those outcomes, that kind of feeds into the outcomes. So what are you hoping to accomplish? If it's to get funding, to get more time, to get people involved, you want to keep that at the forefront, because those are your objectives. And so you need to make sure that you're speaking to that whenever you're crafting your pitch and your documentation. And then finally, everything is storytelling. I like to think about because people, like, we can't hold a lot in our heads. Like, we really can hold about 7 to 10 things like at a time, like in a session. So let's scale that back. like I like to think about 3 things. So if these people walk away after they've consumed whatever pitch or story that I'm telling them, if they could take away 3 things, and that's it. That's it. What are those high level concepts that I want people to remember? And then make sure that you're speaking to those. So it really is all about the story, because that's how we understand everything. We're always telling stories. So if it's not presented in a digestible format, or if it's super disconnected, or if it's too complex, or if you're trying to put too much into it, it's not going to be memorable, and therefore it's not a good story. So how you need to be memorable, right? Like in your pitch, everything. Somebody told me recently, so at work we have these demos that are coming up to show what we've done for the whole quarter. And one of the collaborators in charge of like my area was like, we don't need to practice. Nobody is judging us. I'm like, this is in front of our entire division. Everyone is judging us. like anytime you're in front of people, there is going to be judgment, because that's how humans are. So you want to make a good first impression. People remember the beginning and the end, and a little bit of the middle, right? They're going to remember those high points. So ways that you can be memorable is, first and foremost, be relatable. So you want to meet your audience where they are. So that goes back to understanding who they are, why they're here, why are they giving you time and attention? And then also understand their history with this content. Like, is this a failed project? Have they been trying to do this on their own and not been able to accomplish it? Or so are they already kind of deflated? So you got to pump that energy up. Are they heavily invested, or are they maybe less invested? Maybe this was a side project for them, and you're going to have to try even harder to win them over because they're maybe not that invested. I'm not saying that's the case with this content, but in general, like, everyone as a part of flipping finance has like very real and important challenges. So I don't think that's the case here. But it is an important thing to consider, is that history and the level of interest, like, because that tells you what their level of buy-in is. And if you can make it more relatable to your audience, then you automatically have more buy-in, right? Like, so if it's relatable, they can understand and place themselves with it, then it's going to be more memorable. Same thing with making it meaningful. So along with understanding your audience, what's going to be most important to them? And that comes out at the context clues. Maybe you have a whole solution that solves like 20 different problems, for instance. But this particular audience, you heard specifically from your stakeholder, they're really concerned about elderly health. Speak to that first and foremost, and make that, like, talk about the most important thing first. Okay. And so you want to consider what's important to your audience and speak to that. Also be realistic and accurate. You might recall in some pitch decks, like, there's this format of like, imagine George does this, George doesn't like doing this, and how we're going to make it better. Now that is like less meaningful, because it's almost too stripped down. And it's almost too unrealistic, and it's inaccurate. So you need to talk about your vision that's rooted in reality, right? Like, people could see it happening, and it's backed by data. So that comes with the accuracy. You don't want to, if you're saying something like, we definitely know this, and they have data that disproves it, that automatically you're going to be memorable in the wrong way, right? Another thing that's really important in being memorable is providing context. So it's one thing, like, you've all been there, where you see a table and it's just numbers, right? And you know that the numbers relate to something, it's showing some trend over time. But there are other ways to present that data in a way that provides context. So when you just see the numbers next to a word, there's some context, but how might you visualize that in terms of like what that means in terms of the shape of the piece of the puzzle, and what does the puzzle look like overall? So it's not just enough to explain the gear, but you have to explain how it fits into the whole machine, or at least like the section of the machine, so that there's context that help make it make more sense, so that it's relatable, meaningful, and contextual. And then you also need to repeat yourself. If you have been paying attention, with each point that I'm presenting, I'm repeating it a few times, right? Because I really want you to remember these things. And so repetition is a way that you can make sure that your points are sticky, right? And you can do this in a lot of different ways. You can say the same thing a number of different ways and in different times. You might, you like, don't overdo it, right? Like there's definitely a way to be overly repetitive, but you can, people will remember what you're repeating at least. So there's a balance with all of this, but these are the key elements. And of course there's more to telling a good story, but these are the key takeaways that I'm trying to impart to you. So now let's talk about like your deck or your story structure when it comes to your pitch. So these are all of the elements. This actually comes from a framework that I was given in grad school. We won't talk about how long ago that was, but it was very important and very meaningful. It left a big impression because it's taking effectively the scientific method and turning that into a way that can communicate your concept. So you're going through, whenever you're solving problems, you go through this process, but here's a way to make it relatable, contextual, meaningful to your audience that doesn't get too bogged down in the weeds. So I always start with this kind of a framework, right? And you can switch out your research, like it's called principles. So after your predispositions, you could put your research, depending on how important that is. So I think, again, it goes with like the most meaningful thing first. The most meaningful thing is your problem statement. You want to make sure that you're all on the same page. This is what you're solving for. This is what they can expect. And then you go into giving them confidence that you understand the problem statement. So here are some predispositions, things that we can all agree on. These are known facts about this area. And sometimes I add in, and these are the questions we have in relationship to those known facts, right? Like these are the things that we were trying to answer. A lot of my things end up being research driven. So, but maybe that's not so important here, but it could be. But the key thing here is like those key insights. You want to give an overview of your key insights that you gained throughout this process. Like these are your takeaways. These are the meaningful points. They can be in a bulleted list. They can be, this is like a visualized bulleted list, right? Like you can present them very quickly and then go into detail. But I like to just give an overview of the insights, and then I try to tie those back into my concepts. So here's what we're trying to solve for. Here's what we know about this space. Here are the things we learned. And then here is how we took what we learned and created solutions around them. So then you're tying back everything. Everything leads into this linear story. It doesn't happen that way. That is not how it happened in real life. And we know that, but you have to tell it in a story, in a linear format so people can follow, right? Because that's what you're doing here. You're refining, you're converging down into my concepts and what we can do. So you take those insights and then you contextualize them into the concepts. And there are a lot of different ways to present your concepts, but you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to put too much on the screen. This is probably too much. Like if my power hadn't gone out, I probably would have given you another, like a slide individually with each one of these with more examples, so that it wasn't overdoing each concept and you could focus your attention. Because that's really important, is to focus your audience onto what you want them to pay attention to. Because if you don't do that, they're going to focus on whatever they want to focus on. And that might not be what you want. So you're in control of the story. You're in control of that viewfinder whenever you're presenting your concepts. So another way to contextualize it is only have a couple of concepts per slide, or one concept per slide, or one key insight. And here's the concept that solves for that key insight. But these are ways to help provide context to your concepts so that it's meaningful, contextual, and relatable. You want to do the same thing with your vision. So this is like, you're going on this journey, you're talking about, here's where we are, here's what we know, here's what we did, here are all the ways like we kind of explored this, but then you got to bring it back. You got to bring it back to a center point and be like, okay, so you saw all of these things. This is what I'm talking about. Here is the new world. Here is the new vision. Here's what we hope to accomplish. And it can be short and sweet, but it's the contextualized vision of all of these concepts together do this thing, and here's the good that's going to come out of it, and it's in a contextualized way. It can also be done with like a single image, and you're talking over it, as I'm doing right now. But so then you provide confidence in the solutions that you're presenting through getting everyone on the same page, aligning everyone, showing that you understand that space, showing that you've learned new things about it, and now you have concepts and solutions to help solve problems or opportunities in that area. And here's what it means. So you're taking them on this journey to sell your concepts, and you've given them this vision. Then you got to expand out and be like, here's how we're going to accomplish it. This means this is going back to being realistic and accurate, right? Not only do I have a vision, not only do I understand your space, not only do I have ways to solve for it and improve it, but I also have a way to realize it. And here's the plan forward. You want to, and you do all of this in like, like the simplest ways you can, like you reduce it down. You're not going to do that first. You're going to throw a bunch of stuff up here. You're going to have like 100-page deck first. And that's good. You need that, because you have to then chip away, and anything that isn't accomplishing those 3 key takeaways or those 5 key takeaways is going in the appendix. Okay. So you don't delete it, you make it available, because people are going to have questions about, okay, on your concept, do you have more information? Have you thought about these scenarios? Who else might benefit from this concept? You're like, oh yeah, I have that. It's on appendix page 52 or whatever. And you can slide right on over, answer their questions, provide confidence that you've done your due diligence, and you've thought of things. And if you haven't thought of things, have an appendix page for like additional things to look into, right? But you want to, it's also important to, like if you are presenting, to set the stage that like of when people can ask questions, right? If you have this story that you're crafting, you probably don't want to be interrupted. And I always just say, it's like, okay, I'm going to go through, here's what the shape of this is going to look like. Here is going to be your spot to ask questions, or I make it very clear. You can ask questions when I say, maybe that's a control thing, but it's in a way, it's so that we can meet our time frame, because everything is time bound, or it should be, right? Because that's how we accomplish things. So in your appendix, so you have this whole kind of framework. You can frame a Word document like this as well. But like I said, if you're pitching something, I think a slide deck is the best most effective way to communicate a story and allow people to dive deeper with an additional document. But I'm coming from design, right? That's my context. But in your appendix, you can have reference materials. You can link out to that like detailed, research doc or report. You have additional data. You can detail your concepts out more. When you put them in your deck, they're going to be high level. It should just be an overview. Don't go deep down into the details. You want to keep it a high level, one, so that you can get through all your content, but then two, so that people can remember it. Like if you get too deep into the weeds, they're going to lose the picture of the puzzle. So you got to keep them aware of where they're at in the whole journey and the concept and how this relates to everything else. And then you can also, again, so the appendix is for all the detail that you're not including in your initial story. So I now have time for questions. Well, I don't know. See, I also didn't get to practice this part because I want to show you examples of this in action. So actually, could we pause the recording for this one? Because I'm going to show some sensitive. That was just the. All right, so another example. So there was a question about templates. Canva is a lifesaver. You can see all of these are Canva links actually, because it's what I prefer to use. So there's thousands of templates on Canva. Honestly, I wouldn't have been able to create this beautiful looking presentation. I didn't adjust hardly anything. I mean, I adjusted some things, but it's like these templates really give you a launch pad to getting the noise out of the way. So on Templa, you can see if there's so many free ones. The little crown means you have to pay for it, but there's a lot of free ones here. So I included a link to this page because this might be what you need to use. But there's so much more. When I do freelance projects, which is rarely anymore these days because I have a toddler, but I educate my customers, my clients on Canva because it's just such a great launch pad for all levels. Like I'm an experienced designer of like 12 years and or more even. And so I still use this and I use their templates because it's just such a launch pad to accomplishing things. And you can create a free account. You also, I mean, I pay for an account, but you don't have to, right? So that's where you can find templates. And I want to show another presentation. So this was me actually selling concepts and trying to pitch the work to be done. So again, I'm talking about reality, and then I tell them a story, and then what my goals were, what my expected outcomes were, how I went about understanding this problem space, because that was really important for this audience. Like I needed to demonstrate that I took all of these things into consideration. It's not always that important, but in this case it was. And then I needed to talk about the history in order to say, here's what's going on, right? And I don't make them this flashy. This was like my first one at the company. So it was pretty flashy in that way. But as you can tell, there's not a lot of content actually on the slides. It's all to help illustrate the story, right? So that was it. I was like, here's my next steps. I was selling my next steps, right? And that was it. Here's a more detailed one for, you can see it's a little later, right? Like this is like 4 or 5 months after that one, where I actually did a lot of the work that came out of this. And so it's still setting the stage for facts, what we were trying to accomplish. And again, the data collection was really important, so I talked about it. And then I talked about who that was. And then, okay, well, that's all sensitive, but it's fine. Then I go through these other insights that I gained, and then what the next steps would be. So I just wanted to show you examples in action, and then you'll have this pitch, this deck, and these URLs will take you to additional things. So there's Canva. Here are two on crafting your pitch deck, which it's just more information. It's just like framed in a little different way. Because I had high aspirations of like incorporating some of this content, but anyway, didn't happen. So that is my presentation. You can use the rest of this time to ask questions, to get feedback. It's up to you.
Thank you so much, Poppy. I know this can be a real challenge in our field. A lot of the things you mentioned. I pulled up some presentations that were sent to, well, that have been given to us for RFPs that we've sent out, and for the same reason, we need to stop recording before I really can't, but show them. But I'll be honest, 100%, we're getting a pitch made to us, and there's too much text on the page, so I'm reading ahead, and I'm not even listening to what they're saying. And then it turns out when I go back to look on it, all I've got is the text again, and I really missed the context of why they were telling me about this. And so distractions, it's very easy to move ahead. I know I think about that a lot when I'm giving presentations, just to make sure I'm keeping them focused on really the one part I want them to focus on. And then, you know, you might not have that too much with the challenges this year, but I know in the past we've had PowerPoint slides that, I mean, you filled it up from corner to corner with financial statements and things like that. And if you are, you know, wanting to incorporate financial statements, those are much more appropriate in totality for the appendix, as Poppy kind of referred to with other things. And then maybe the line item and a snippet, or a smaller section of cash flows or something like that, however you're doing it. But feel free to use the appendix. That's going to be great for them to refer to. So I think, Poppy, everything that you gave us today is really relatable, and even Canva, especially for me. Poppy is, as she mentioned, an experienced designer. I am not, and I have to do marketing materials all the time, and so I use Canva for that, sometimes for presentations, and super helpful tool. So you don't have to be a very experienced designer to use it either. And I think Elise was asking, is it easily shareable? Yeah, super easy. You give edit permissions, just like you would. I think Emily covered that with like Google Drive. So, oh wait,
Yeah,
Emily was asking
I was gonna show how easy it is to
Yeah.
share. So let's see. Oh dear, here it is. Okay. So you craft it, then you have your elements. It's so easy to use. These were all of the like available pages for that PowerPoint template. And then whenever you want to share it, it's just a share link right here. And you can either download it in a variety of formats or get a website like I did here. You can even present and record from this, and it gives you a timer like you would in PowerPoint. I don't use that a whole lot, but that's how easy it is.
I think while you're talking, were you planning on sharing the screen on what you were just talking about? Because we didn't see what you were saying.
Yeah, you're not sharing screen anymore.
Awesome. Yeah, good call. So as you can see, here are the available pages that were part of the template that I used for today's presentation. things are really easy to like move around. And there are these different elements where if I wanted to change the whole color scheme, I could, right? Like let's change this, and I could change them all to that color, for instance. So easy. Canva's like one of the most valuable recent IPOs in history, actually. So they got a good thing going. There's additional elements to use. You can add photos. You have your own photo library as well. And then to share, there's just a big share button, and you can download it, and you can download it into different formats as well. Basically, the only thing you don't have is this infinite canvas that you would get with more design tools and vector editing. But they're even like, I even do some like product examples in here because now they have that like a plugin to do that. So I'm just trying to find it. Okay, I feel really embarrassed right now that you're like looking into it's like looking into my drawer. But if I go back to, if I go back here and say, I'm going to introduce like a photo. I'm just going to pull in a photo here. It's loading. Yeah, let's do that one. That's fun. But now I want to edit it. Like also, because it'll bother me to front. Okay. There are also some hotkeys if you get into that stuff. But you can edit this, and it has a lot of different photo editing opportunities here. Like you can't get super detailed like you would in a true photo editing app, but there's a lot of different effects you can add and play around with. And the thing that I really like to do is like these smart mockups, because I'm in product design. I can like just, there it is. It's going to pop up. Wow. And so we it's just such a great tool.
I wanted to mention with Canva too, just because I know a lot of you will be submitting resumes with your solution submissions, and if you're looking for a way to get your resume to stand out, I know Canva has a lot of kind of funner, especially in the design world. Like if you're not doing a purely finance resume, they got some funner designs, more modern looks and things like that. So you might use that too as a template for that, but certainly don't feel like you have to. Just might help stand out a little bit more with our sponsors. So
definitely. Here are the slides, by the way.
Thank you, and I'll drop these into Slack as well. What questions do we have for Poppe while we have her here today? Gina, you've been quiet today. You're on mute.
Why are you gonna put me on Front Street, Brian?
Just wanted to check in with you.
I'm absorbing and reaching into areas that are not as familiar with me, sure, but making sure that, and I'm a note taker, so I've been engaged.
Yeah, this has been a super helpful, and I've been doing the same here. And I think Gina's gotten the link to Poppe's Calendly. Does everyone else know what she was referencing earlier or have the link to that? I can't remember if we dropped it in with her biography or not, but Poppe has kind of volunteered herself and to lend more time if you have questions on some of these tools or last minute help with challenges. Knowing they're due tomorrow, it would be tough, I think, but certainly we appreciate her for doing that. Questions?
I just dropped it in the chat too.
Thank you.
And that applies to sponsors as well. Like, I care.
I know this, yeah. How's everyone doing? Otherwise, questions on the challenges or what's coming up? So There is no workshop tomorrow. So the bond bank's office is closed, but I'll still be around on Slack and email. But there will not be a session tomorrow with solutions being due by 11:59. I'll send out the link into Slack and to the email group as well, just so everyone knows exactly where that's going. And then Saturday morning, really, I think our challenge track owners are going to be reviewing all of our submissions, and Travis being one of them. And I think I saw Christy on here. I'm not sure if there was anyone else, but yeah, I think actually Travis, first solution came in for you this morning. Haven't sent it over to you yet.
So just to be clear, can you make sure, what do we all have to turn in tomorrow?
Yeah, thanks. So it'll be a similar first part to the team and challenge selection. So we'll just ask for team, whose challenge you're working on, what that challenge is, and your team name, team members, and then really the deliverables that get dropped in as a file is the 1 to 2 page abstract that's written, and then a link to a video presentation. So we can't take the video in its format itself. We need a link to it. I just couldn't get that to work. So need to upload it somewhere like Google Drive or YouTube. And then if the team members want to drop their resume into the form, they can do that as well. And that's just a click and drag or upload.
And what time is that by?
Midnight.
Yeah.
Yep. So by Saturday, really just by Saturday.
Yeah, I'm asking dumb questions. You know, Brian, I got
no. These are not.
I want to make sure all the teams are ready.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Your teams did great, and believe me, they're not dumb. And I'm glad you asked, because sure enough, on Saturday, someone's going to ask me, and it'll be too late. So.
Yeah, I was just over at the study area where a bunch of them are working now, so it's fun.
Oh, good. I do have a follow-up question for you. I just reach out after, but okay. I think there's one team audit too that I just need a little more information on, but that's okay. It. Travis, any last, and Christy, any last words of inspiration for our innovators before you start getting their solutions in?
I just want to pick up on something that Poppe said that I learned a long time ago. I learned it in a little different phrase, but it's still the same thing. When you're pitching something to someone, use the words, the action I want you to take is, fill in the blank, and the benefit you will receive is, fill in the blank. Make it very, very simple, because sometimes there's a lot of information and you need to condense it. This is what you need to do, and this is what you're going to get from that.
Yeah, great point, Travis. Hope anyone who's planning to submit to Travis was listening there.
And I love pictures and graphs.
There you go. Inside information here. All righty, well, we will send these recordings out again. And Poppe, I just want to thank you one more time. Hope everyone has a great long weekend. Looking forward to seeing everything that gets submitted to us, and just be on the lookout in case we need to follow up with anything, or if the challenge track owners are reaching out to you next week. Sessions resume on Monday. A little bit of a different spin to them. These are more kind of on the more professional development side, especially in the world of public finance. So really looking forward to those. And again, I guess we'll be talking soon, I'm sure.